This week's Torah reading, Chukat, describes, among other things, the death of Moses' siblings, Aaron and Miriam. And we realize that this portion, like so many portions in the Torah, are connected with the stories we tell about the events. In other words, the way we read the Torah portion is the way we read it in light of how the rabbis read it centuries ago. So, for example, when we read in the book of Genesis about God's call to Abraham, we realize that he's 75 years old when Abraham is called by God. But we understand and remember a story that we learned when we were in Hebrew school, that Abraham's father, Terah, had an idol shop. And had Abraham become the monotheist that he was, he recognized that as a child, that those idols don't speak and they have no power at all. That story is not found in the Torah, but it's a story that was told throughout the generations by the rabbis for 2,000 years, so that it's as if it's part of the Torah. So a similar story is told about Miriam, that when she died, immediately a well that had been following the people through the desert dried up. It's because of Miriam and her powers of prophecy that the people were blessed with a miracle of having a well follow them miraculously underground as they traveled through the desert. And when she died, that well dried up. How do we know? The rabbis say because the next thing that occurred in the Torah after her death is the people complaining of thirst. The stories we tell from the stories in the Torah create the new story and the new narrative that is Torah. And briefly, I just want to share, I'm still on the Hartman program in Jerusalem. Today we had a field trip. We had a choice of field trips. I went with 25 other rabbis and spouses to what is called a development town, one of the towns that was built in the early 1950s to accommodate the waves and waves of immigrants of Jews from Arab countries in the early 50s. These Jews facing persecution in those Arab countries now that the state of Israel had been established, and Israel had to accommodate these rising tides of immigrants. And they built these towns haphazardly and quickly throughout Israel. We went to a town called Yerucham, south of Beersheba, and met with Moroccan immigrants, including a woman who arrived in Israel in August of 1963, married at age 19, with a child and pregnant with her second child, arrived at this transit camp, this development town, and 3 days later was hired to be David Ben-Gurion's breakfast chef. She went to the next town, Sde Boker, which is where David Ben-Gurion had a home, and she was the one to cook him breakfast every day. These immigrants, though, there is a debate in Israeli society as how they were treated, and were they treated properly? What is the story of the Eastern Europe, the Arab immigrants, the Jewish immigrants from Arab countries versus the story of Jews immigrating after the Holocaust, the relationship between Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews. There is one story that the Israeli government told and is taught, and then there's the other story of the immigrants themselves. We only hope and pray that we are open to understanding where the story comes from, understanding all the details of the story, so that when through this research and uncovering new details, we become better people. Shabbat Shalom.